from the 80,000 documents that have just been revealed, you will not learn who killed John F. Kennedy. However, you also will learn some things, which is not what the mainstream media would like you to believe. It's not what a lot of trolls online would like you to believe. I think they're all bots funded by the CIA, have told you basically nothing in these files. Go home. Go back to sleep, America. There are some things revealed in these documents. There's a lot less revealed in these documents than a lot of people had hoped. Shocker. But there are things that deserve being talked about. Here's an example. The New York Times coverage of them. New trove of Kennedy files offers few revelations so far. And then you scroll down. Here's what to know. Oswald still did it. I have never met somebody recently in the past like 3-4 years who still thinks Oswald did it. I know they're out there. Like, I know they exist, you know, kind of like dudes who've used glory holes at gas station rest stops. I know they must exist. I just haven't met any recently, or at least not who admit to it, who honestly still believe that Oswald did this. Yeah. Basically, when something like this comes out, what you need to do is go to like New York Times, something like that, see what they're saying and go the opposite direction. Whatever they tell you, it's the opposite. So if they're saying nothing to see here, close the file and walk home and ignore it, and Oswald still did it, you can be sure the opposite is true. I did not think, I mean, I don't know what you guys felt. I did not think that these files were going to be a big blinking CIA memo that says, well, we got him. Like, if you thought the CIA was going to release that even now, so many decades later, then you are kind of out of your mind. Also, a lot of people have been pointing out that much of this was already available. Sure, there were some redactions that are now unredacted, but many people are pointing out that in most of these files, those redactions weren't anything that significant, if they were there at all. A lot of this is already out there. And I'll give you an example. People have been passing this around. The file that says the CIA is responsible for the J.F.K. assassination. Okay. Now, if you actually look at what the file is, it is an article from Ramparts magazine from the 1960s, I think. The big bombshell, quote unquote, that so many people are saying is a memo by the CIA that was published by no, it's not a memo by the CIA. It's a story about another CIA agent that was published by Ramparts magazine in the 60s. Wow. Bombshell there. And this is not the CIA saying they're responsible for the JFK assassination. It is a CIA agent who had said that, according to other witnesses, that the CIA killed Kennedy, and he was then found dead a few months later. And intelligence agents who performed special assignments for the CIA claimed that the agency was responsible for the death of President John Kennedy. And let's see, Gary Underhill, he traveled from Washington, D.C. to New Jersey to confide in his friends that he believed a small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination. Underhill told his friends he feared for his life. 6 months later, he was found dead in what was ruled a suicide. And why would the CIA, for those of you who are wondering, why would the CIA have this in their files? Well, you got to remember, this is a time prior to the internet, prior to most computer files. So anytime a magazine came out, if the CIA wanted to know that this had been printed, they'd create a file of it and they'd create a photocopy of it and they'd put the photocopy in the file and it would say they wouldn't put notes on it like, not true. They wouldn't like circle it and draw a penis and go, we disagree. They would just photocopy it, put it in a file. So this is not the CIA acknowledging this is true. Now, I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that a former CIA agent feared for his life, then he's found dead after saying that the CIA killed Kennedy. Anyway, here's an example of one of the things people are acting like is a bombshell. That is not a bombshell. It is one of those things that people should know. Like, they should know that a CIA agent said the CIA killed Kennedy and then he was killed or killed himself, like Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. They're still like the New York Times that tells you Oswald still did it. They're still staking that belief on the absolutely 100%, 100 billion% debunked magic bullet theory. The Warren Commission and idiots for many generations have said that, okay, well, there's only 3 bullets could have been fired. There was only time for 3 bullets, even though there's an argument that there wasn't even time for that. But there's only time for 3 bullets. So you got 3 bullets. One misses completely. One goes through Kennedy's neck, and then one hits his head. And they couldn't figure out, how do we explain that the governor who was sitting in front of him also got hit in multiple places? And so this bullet ultimately makes 6 wounds. It's like in and out of Kennedy, then into the back of the seat, then in and out of the governor, then through the governor's wrist. So you got in and out of the governor's wrist, and ultimately lodges in his thigh. So it's like, makes 6 wounds, and the bullet, which they still have on display somewhere in the archives, is like untouched. And if you actually follow the medical analysis, people have done testing on cadavers. When a bullet is fired into bone, into really flesh too, but if it hits any bones, it's going to be heavily deformed. And instead, this bullet is magic. It's pristine. It hit 6 different wounds. It took out 2 people. This is one hell of a goddamn bullet. And so no one believes the magic bullet idea. It's not a theory. It's just a story Arlen fucking Specter made up just so he could have a way to explain this garbage. Okay, well, here's another. This one actually is something that has been revealed by these files. And I'm going to play a clip, believe it or not, from MSNBC, because they're actually talking to one of the better JFK investigators, Jefferson Morley.
Yeah, so we spent last night going through the 2000 or so documents. And I got to tell you, Lincoln, there's a sensational story here that people need to know. This is not a nothing burger, as people will tell you. There's an amazingly interesting and pregnant story in these JFK files. Let me explain. Late last night, we got the unredacted testimony of CIA counterintelligence chief James Angleton, who testified behind closed doors to Senate investigators in 1970. Up till yesterday, about 40 pages of the 113-page transcript were redacted. All of those redactions have come off, and we see a new window into the CIA's pre-assassination surveillance of Lee Harvey Oswald. One document, FBI document released yesterday, indicates that Angleton recruited Lee Harvey Oswald as a 20-year-old Marine as a contact or a source for the CIA in 1959. Other documents released in recent years show that Angleton kept Oswald under surveillance, monitoring his politics, his personal life, his foreign travels, his contacts for the next 4 years, from November 1959 to November 1963. By November 1963, we now know, thanks to these documents, Angleton had a 180-page file on Oswald on his desk a week before Kennedy went to Dallas. So what this story raises is the question, was the CIA incredibly, atrociously incompetent when it came to Lee Harvey Oswald? Or was Angleton actually running an operation involving? We don't have the answer to that question because there's still some relevant records to come out. For example, one file of another CIA officer who was involved in the pre-assassination surveillance of Oswald is still kept secret. So there's a great first start. There's an incredible.
So he says we don't have enough information to know whether Angleton was running an operation with Oswald, meaning using him. And I think there's enough information to know that. Like, if you read just a couple of books on this stuff, you'll find out how much the CIA was doing with Oswald. They were moving him around. They were having him do various things, such as getting arrested with at one moment he's anti-Castro, at another moment he's pro-Castro. He's running psyops for the CIA. And, you know, for those who don't know, he's got this crazy history where Oswald is working on classified he's in the military, he's working on classified planes. I can't remember the name of the spy plane that the US was working on. He then supposedly defects, and we now know the CIA had a false defector program where they would pretend someone defected from the US so that they could try and spy and learn things from other governments. So Oswald defects to Russia, where Russia, we know from revealed documents, knew immediately to watch this guy. Like, at no point was Russia like, "Hey, we've got this defector we can use." They knew something was up. So Oswald is carefully monitored while he's in the Soviet Union. He then comes back to the United States, and you'd think that the U.S. just picture how would the U.S. behave if someone working on classified aircraft defected to the Soviet Union, then came back to the U.S.? Do you think they would say, totally fine, come on in, perfect, we love it, you're welcome back, open arms? No. The actual way they would respond is probably locking them up in prison, maybe assassinating them. Instead, Oswald is just left to just his own devices. Now he's actually being moved around in certain ways, given jobs by CIA. It's not clear Oswald even knew how much he was being moved around by the CIA. Like, he's offered a job and he takes it, and it turns out that job is by far someone who's connected to the CIA. Oswald didn't know that. He just thinks he's taking a job. So this is another one that's making the rounds. So apparently the bracketed part was the part that had been redacted, and this is talking about James Ingleton. We just heard him mentioned before. He was a truly sinister head of counterintelligence for the CIA. If you had to guess, he and Alan Dulles were some of the pivotal people in this whole plot. And basically, it says CIA directors permitted Angleton to run several intelligence projects, many of them with the Israeli intelligence service. So this is showing that Angleton was working, at least in partnership, with the Israeli intelligence service. And there's, X is, Twitter/X is increasingly turning far right wing. So there's a lot of people on Twitter and X posting this screenshot and saying, oh, this shows the Jews killed Kennedy. A lot of problems with that. One, Israel is not the Jews, okay? As an anti-Zionist Jew, you can be Jewish and not be Israel, okay? The more you know. Let's keep learning, folks. Let's keep learning. Secondly, the Israeli intelligence service working with Angleton is a revelation. And again, people need to know it. And to me, it sounds significant. It doesn't, these documents, loads of them have nothing to do with the assassination. So the fact that Angleton was perpetrating intelligence projects, many of them with Israeli intelligence, does not mean that he worked with them on the assassination of Kennedy. That is not what this memo says. Now, if you feel like believing that without evidence, then feel free. But that is not what this memo says. I do think it's a significant story that our CIA, going all the way back to the 60s at minimum, was working closely with Israeli intelligence. I think that's a story. I think that would be a lovely story for the mainstream media to discuss. Absolutely. This is another one. A Russian went to the Bulgarian embassy 3 months before the assassination of J.F.K. and warned of it. The CIA knew months before that this was planned. So some people want to say, oh, here's proof that it's kind of like October 7th. Even New York Times has reported that Israel knew about the October 7th attack for a year beforehand. People who really want to give the benefit of the doubt to the most murderous, bloodthirsty groups in the world, they go, oh, well, yeah, Israel knew about it, but they just let it slip through their fingers. They just weren't paying attention. But you've got to really be a child to believe that. Yes, the CIA knew that there was an assassination that was going to be had on Kennedy because they were the ones planning it. Of course they knew. And the reason a Russian knew, or some Russians knew, is because of the way that Oswald was behaving. These crazy meetings at the Mexican embassy, the Russian embassy in Mexico, etc. But the CIA didn't do anything with these reports because of course they're not going to do anything with these reports. They want, and something else that a lot of people don't know this, it's covered in the Oliver Stone documentary series that came out recently. There were 2 prior setups that were almost identical to Dallas before Dallas happened. The CIA or whoever took out Kennedy had 2 setups that were planned in the prior weeks. One in Miami and one in Chicago. The Chicago one especially is strikingly similar to what happens in Dallas, except it didn't end up happening. In Chicago, so you have Oswald, Oswald's ex-Marine, been tracked by the CIA, gets a job in a tallish, over a few stories building on a steep curve that the motorcade is going to come down. He gets a job on the, 3rd, 4th floor, and he gets that job just a few months, a few weeks before the motorcade goes there, as if someone was placing him there. Well, there was a soldier, an ex-Marine in Chicago, named, I think, Valentine or something like that, who got a job at a, 4-story building, on the 4th story of a building at the curve where the motorcade was going to slow down in Chicago. And the reason that one didn't happen weeks before the so-called Oswald plot, is because Kennedy didn't go to Chicago because there'd been assassination of the, I think, Indonesian leader right before, the day before or something. So he didn't go. And some of the snipers were actually caught by, I think, the FBI or something in Chicago. And, they do nothing with it. Like, you would think if Kennedy didn't go to Chicago and they found that plot, they would have gone, like, if they cared or wanted to stop it, they would have gone running to Kennedy and said, hey, when you go any of your future motorcade stops, we're not doing the open roof anymore. We're not doing the slow curves anymore. It's too easy. We just caught a guy who was planning to shoot you. But of course they don't. They ignore all of it. Okay, here's another one that is a revelation to some people, but not really a revelation. So this guy tweets out, and it doesn't matter whether he's a reliable person or not. That's not really the point. He says, not sure if this is publicly known, but it is now 100% confirmed that the CIA was involved in the assassination of the Dominican leader, Trujillo. But of course, this is publicly known. What we're looking at in the J.F.K. files is an article from the New Republic in April 1963. So yet again, this is the CIA filing away articles that have revealed their actions. So obviously, this is not the first time this is known. This is literally an article from 1963. And the article from 1963 in the New Republic says the assassination of the Dominican Republic's Rafael Trujillo was carried out with the assistance of the U.S. CIA. And then they go into the details. Arms for the May 30th, 1961 slaying of the 69-year-old dictator on a lonely stretch of highway. His capital was smuggled by the CIA into the country, meaning the arms, the rifles that killed him, at the request of the assassins. So the assassins were in league with CIA. CIA brings them guns, smuggles them in, and takes out Trujillo. Yet again, not secret. It was in an article in the New Republic in 1963. It's amazing that people want to be like, whoa, my God. That's a new expression I just made up. Whoa, my God. Whoa, my God. Can you believe it? We just found out that they killed Trujillo. It's literally an article from the 1960s. Let's see. So this is from Express in the UK. This is their biggest bombshells from the 80,000 documents, which, of course, they could not have read all of because they came out a day ago and it's 80,000 of them. Here's what they have so far. The Soviet Union, who was spying on Oswald from the moment he became a defector, said he was a poor shot, like a terrible shot at a firing range. One document stated the KGB monitored Oswald while he was in the USSR. Oswald had a Soviet wife, with one document commenting he has a stormy relationship with his Soviet wife who rode him incessantly. The former Marine spent time in the country where he was monitored continuously by the KGB. Tellingly, one document on his marksmanship skills says that they observed him at a firing range and he was a poor shot. Amazing that this poor shot ultimately gets off the most amazing 3 shots in record time that even expert marksmen, they're able to get it off in that time, like get the shots off in that time, but they're not able to do much with them. Like, just to fire 3 with a bolt action gun that quickly is insane. A memo released by left-wing magazine spotlights John Garrett Underhill. So again, this is not new. It was written in Ramparts magazine. Underhill was the one I talked about earlier. CIA agent said the CIA killed Kennedy. He was found dead a few months later. Oswald was not a KGB spy. Again, anybody with half a brain knew that because the KGB was actually kind of terrified of Oswald because they knew like something was up. They knew the CIA seemed to be doing something with Oswald, but they thought it was going to be blamed on them. So then, especially after Kennedy's killed, the USSR is wondering whether the US is going to think it was them and fire nuclear missiles. Then the document I already brought you about how the CIA was warned about how he was going to be killed. And then they say most of the documents are not new. I love that the title of the article is the 5 biggest bombshells, and one of them is that it's not new. How is that a bombshell? Here are the 5 biggest bombshells from the documents. Number 1, there's not much in them. Boom. Bombshell. Awesome. Lisa Pease has put out found one document that talks about the CIA was planning to destroy Cuban crops. That was one of their plans because starving people to death is just standard MO for the CIA. And here is their formerly redacted document saying that they could cause crop failure in Cuba because they were furious that capitalism had been kicked out. How dare Cuba have a life of their own or sovereignty or any of those things? It says these plans for the crop failures will envisage both the use of controlled assets that can be infiltrated and exfiltrated and the provision of encouragement and guidance to the resistance so that it will undertake acts of sabotage, some of which are to be directed against crops, particularly rice. And let's remember that the CIA has also admitted to several hundred attempts on Fidel Castro, several hundred assassination attempts, either planned, attempted, etc. And you can go read, it's even in Wikipedia. Even Wikipedia admits it. Here's another article from the UK. CIA dismissal of Oswald concerns. And, you know, that's the thing is mainstream media is acting like the dismissal of Oswald concerns is just because the CIA was busy or they weren't doing a good job. No, the dismissal of Oswald concerns was because they were using him. He was their guy. He was their patsy. Evidence of CIA funding linked to Oswald. And this also had been known before this. I guess they didn't have every document on it because it is talked about in the Oliver Stone documentary series and some other places. One document reveals that the CIA officers, George Joannides, funneled $25,000 to an anti-Castro group with ties to Oswald. This raises questions about the agency's relationship with the alleged assassin, though it doesn't prove direct involvement in the assassination itself. It just proves they were funding him, nothing else. And also, George Joannides, a CIA officer, successfully got himself placed as the what do they call it, the go-between, but they don't use the word go-between, between the CIA and the Church Committee, which was the Committee on Assassinations that was reinvestigating who killed Kennedy. This is many years after the Warren Commission. And the go-between was George Joannides. Little did they know that, because he wasn't being honest with them, of course, with Congress, that is. Little did they know George Joannides was a CIA officer who was connected to, had been funding the anti-Castro groups that were part and parcel to Oswald, et cetera. So that's kind of something important to know. FBI knowledge of Oswald's murder. FBI record details a phone call received before Oswald's death, predicting his murder by Jack Ruby. This eerie foresight, previously buried, suggests that someone had inside knowledge of the events, adding a layer of intrigue to Ruby's actions. And it's been proven that Ruby was, at minimum, a CIA informant. That doesn't necessarily mean he was doing actions for the CIA, but to go from a CIA informant to more for the CIA is not a big leap. And also, I think they put some kind of pressure on Ruby to do what he did. Because something else that is never mentioned is Ruby knew Oswald. Ruby and Oswald had been together for something at some point. And so he already knew Oswald, which is weird. And they put some kind of pressure on him to kill Oswald. And in fact, he chickened out the first time. The first time, after they've arrested Oswald, have you ever seen them do this with any other gunman, criminal, almost anything? I mean, maybe occasionally, but it's pretty rare, especially with an assassin, to parade them in front of just loads of people. Absolute, easy shot. And they paraded him the first time, and Ruby was there, and he didn't shoot him. And so they had to do it again for Ruby to get the shot. And so then they again parade him, and that's when Ruby shoots him. And first time he's going to testify, I think, for the Warren Commission, a CIA connected, although he did not admit it at the time, but we now have evidence. Even the New York Times has reported on him being CIA connected. Psychiatrist called nicknamed Jolly. Sounds like a jolly guy. Jolly West goes in and visits with him. This is days before he's going to testify. Ruby's going to testify what he knows. And Jolly West comes out and goes, yeah, he's had a break with reality. He's lost his mind. He's completely gone. There was no evidence by witness testimony by anyone else that Ruby was out of his mind. There may have been witnesses saying, hey, he killed that guy. But there was no one saying he was out of his mind until Jolly West goes in, has a couple hours with him, and he goes insane. Jolly West also was working for a CIA operation for mind control, to create mind control using LSD and other drugs and various kinds of torture to create mind control. For a while there, for 1 year, he was working out of the same office that Charles Manson was coming into on a weekly basis. the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, which was both the office for the CIA, and they're doing their mind control experiments on young hippies, and for some odd reason, Charles Manson was there once a week, and the CIA had nothing to do with it. So he goes in, and Jack Ruby, quote unquote, goes insane. And then a while goes by, Ruby's still in prison, and then he's supposed to testify again. Maybe this is for the church committee, maybe this is for the Committee on Assassinations. I'm not sure which testimony this was, but he's about to testify again in a few weeks. And this time they go in and they give him injections for something. And what do you know? He's riddled with cancer, filled with cancer, dies within like 2 weeks of the first sign of cancer after he's given injections by someone we know now is a CIA-connected doctor, a CIA doctor. They say in the files, mafia connections resurface. Oh, yeah, by the way, also another fun thing is this photo of Oswald with the gun, showing off his gun. There's 3 versions or 3 photos of him holding that gun. And in this one, the wedding ring is on his right hand. And in another one, his wedding ring is on his left hand. What does that tell you? Do you think he decided to switch his wedding ring mid photo? But obviously someone doctored the Oswald photos, which means they needed to create a photo of him holding that gun to make it look like he'd had that gun, etc. Here's one more, and I got to be honest, I do not know a lot about the history of Hungary, so I will just tell you what Ben Norton says. Ben Norton says the original anti-imperialists who were smeared as so-called tankies, the commander of the U.S.-backed insurgents in the violent 1956 counter-revolution attempt in socialist Hungary was General Bela Karolyi. And we now know that he was a CIA asset. And it just shows you how long this shit has been going on. Ben's talking about the original anti-imperialists. So anti-imperialists back in the 1950s saying that the U.S. and the CIA are counter-revolutionaries, are assassinating people like Lumumba, are involved in these color revolution type things, anti-revolutionary forces. They were called conspiracy theorists. They were called insane. Well, here's the original document. Hungarian freedom fighters, etc. So discussion of these Hungarian freedom fighters. And then there's one little part that's redacted. And here's what we saw. The Hungarian freedom fighters were agency sponsored. Is addressed to Major General Bela Karolyi, president of the Hungarian Freedom Fighters Federation. The Hungarian freedom fighters were agency sponsored. So the CIA was funding the anti-revolutionary forces in Hungary. And just one of many examples. Here's the last thing. This is an audio clip of J.F.K. And I wonder what exactly he's talking about in this audio clip.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned. No rumor is printed. No secret is revealed.
And I don't know who he was talking about. Maybe it was Chia, perhaps? And, I'm not going to go through the whole history of Kennedy. Again, Oliver Stone's 4-part documentary recently is pretty good on all that. Most of you know that Kennedy was really at war with the CIA. He felt betrayed by them with the Bay of Pigs. They knew the Bay of Pigs wouldn't work. They thought that Kennedy would invade Cuba like they wanted once the Bay of Pigs failed, but they told him it would work, and he said he would absolutely not invade, and they just figured he would once it failed. But he did not, and he was furious with them. And that's just one example of him going at the CIA. He fired the head of the CIA, Alan Dulles. But the thing is, when you're the head of the CIA and you're Alan Dulles, he's essentially still the head of the CIA. All of his CIA guys would just call him up and get their marching orders from him, whether he was working there or not. Also, for some odd reason, the head of the CIA, Alan Dulles, that's fired by Kennedy because Kennedy is furious with him, he ends up being on the Warren Commission. A good guy to have there, right? Real respected guy to have deciding who killed JFK. It's so disgusting. He also, JFK famously said the CIA should be broken up into 1,000 pieces and sprinkled into the wind. He also had put forward that they were going to slowly decrease the budget of the CIA. It was over time. And it was, I believe, going to begin that year, the decreasing of the CIA's budget.